Good evening. The Board of Trustees of Cypress-Fairbanks Independent School District is now convened in a special called meeting on Thursday, February 27, 2014, in the boardroom of the Cypress-Fairbanks Independent School District Instructional Support Center, 10,300 Jones Road, Houston, Texas, at 6 p.m. I want to welcome the members of our audience and our television viewers to this meeting of the Board of Trustees. As the Cypress-Fairbanks Board of Trustees, we are here to set goals, listen to reports from the superintendent, approve budgets, contracts, personnel appointments, and make policy for the district. It is not the role of the board to make day-to-day operational decisions. The management and day-to-day operations of the district are the responsibility of the superintendent. We have policies and procedures in place to resolve concerns and issues. This is a public meeting of the Board of Trustees. Go ahead, Teresa. Not a meeting of the public. Prior to this meeting, board members received information related to items on tonight's agenda. Agenda items will not necessarily be handled in the order listed on the notice. The meeting is open to all who wish to attend and hear the matters discussed. During the course of this meeting, the board may determine that a closed session is necessary. In that event, the board will meet in closed session to consider matters duly posted for this meeting as permitted by Section 551.071 to 551.084, inclusive of the Texas Government Code. These proceedings are airing live on CFTV Channel 16 and CFTV online on the district website. They will also be rebroadcast throughout the month on Channel 16 and available as video on demand on the website. For the tape to adequately reflect the proceedings, I respectfully ask that you please refrain from talking while others are speaking and that cell phones are turned off or in silent mode. Thank you for taking the time to join us this evening and for your interest in the Cypress-Fairbanks Independent School District. Before we begin, I've got a couple of housekeeping items. Our student helping us tonight, we only have one, from Cypress Lakes High School is Marcus Loyster, and his AVP sponsor is Adriel Ortiz. And then if you'll notice as you look up here, we have one board member who is absent, Ms. Hartley, and she gave me a statement to read. It says, "So sorry to miss the meeting tonight. I am traveling with the Classics," that's the drill team at Cy Ranch, for those of you that don't know, "to Orlando for competition. As many know, these trips are planned a year in advance. I wish I could be there to show my support for the election order and hear public comments. I will watch in online, so Don, don't mess it up." That's verbatim. At this time, the board will hear public comments related to the Long Range Planning Committee recommendation for a bond referendum. Ms. Ray has a sign-up sheet if any patron wishes to address the board. Each speaker will be given... I'm just calling them?
Yeah.
Oh, there you go. Each speaker will be given 2 minutes to address the board. Mr. Bob Covey, board member, will be the designated timekeeper. And before we begin, I want to remind everyone that the board is not actually voting on this bond tonight. What we are voting on is for the public to be able to vote on this bond. So we're voting for an election order. Just want to clear that up in case someone thinks we're actually voting on the bonds itself. Our first speaker tonight is Thomas Bazan.
Honorable President Ryan, trustees, staff, and concerned citizens, I wish to again urge the board to hold the bond election in November, not May. The citizens are only being allowed a few short weeks to evaluate the merit of this massive $1.2 billion bond package. If it is as lean as claimed and every dollar of proposed spending is absolutely crucial for the children of the district, then why must this proposed debt package be hurried? Is it not better to convince the larger pool of November voters that the spending of $1.2 billion in bonds is what the majority of the property owners and taxpayers truly need? If the May 10th bond election fails, precious time and taxpayer resources would have been wasted trying to rush this package past the voters.
Thank you, Mr. Bazan.
Thank you.
Our second speaker tonight will be Todd Running.
Dr. Henry, President Ryan, distinguished board members, my name is Todd Running. I'm a 16-year resident of Jersey Village. I am the father of 4 with 3 children currently attending Cyfair schools. I urge you to vote yes for this bond election. I served for 2 years on the Cyfair Safety Committee and currently serve on the Superintendent's Parents Advisory Committee. So I'm well aware of the needs and challenges our school district faces. One of the main reasons my wife and I decided to move to the Cyfair area was the quality of the education children were receiving in this district. We want that quality of education to continue for all our children and the children that come after them. We also feel that it's important to preserve and increase our property values. The way to make sure both of those happen is to properly fund our school district. For less than the cost of one dinner out with my family per year, this bond referendum could serve many of the important needs our district faces. I'm only going to mention 3 of them. First is to upgrade buildings for the overall safety and security of our children. The installation of security vestibules in older facilities like Jersey Village High School is very important. It will help ensure that people that are on our campuses actually belong there. Second is to reinstate bus service for all students. The current 2-mile limit is very restricted and leaves many families struggling to get their children to and from school safely. The cost savings alone for gas and time getting their children to school, not to mention the overall reduction in congestion in front of all of our schools in the mornings and afternoons, makes this bond highly desirable. Finally, this bond will keep our students competitive by upgrading aging technology throughout our district. Having access to current and reliable technology is very important to students and teachers. It will give our children the learning opportunities to be competitive in whatever they choose to pursue after graduation. I urge the board to vote yes for this bond election and to continue to move our district forward, provide for the safety of our children, keep our property values high, and give our students the best quality education possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Running. Our next speaker is Sharon Stringfellow.
Hi, good evening. I am becoming a familiar face from the Cypress Creek Lakes area. But I just wanted to say that, first of all, I want to really thank the effort of the Bond Steering Committee to put together this bond and present it. I would strongly encourage the board to vote yes for it for the May election. For the May election, I would say it is truly a benefit versus postponing it to November for the children from the transportation perspective of the kids who do not currently have bus service. This would at least be able to get it reinstated for the new school year. As well as, I was very pleased to know that safety, transportation, as well as technology was very high in their thought process for this bond. It's going to benefit every student in Cyfair, not necessarily if you're with bus service, without bus service, if you're in an old school or new school. It is benefiting every student in Cyfair SD. So I think from the minimal tax increase, which is what most parents would pay to put a kid in baseball season or 15 cups of coffee from Starbucks a year, I think it's well worth it for the safety of the children. And I would definitely say vote yes for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Stringfellow. Our next speaker is Dr. Audrey Levy.
Good evening, Board of Trustees and Superintendent. I am the president at Lone Star College Cyfair. What you do in this district impacts us at Lone Star College. Our success of our college is based on the success of the school system. Someone says what stays in the Cyfair school system doesn't stay in the Cyfair school system because it spills out into what we do at the college. Let me speak to each of the items that are briefly on the items that you're considering of why we should go out for a bond. Having our students have the ability to understand technology and to use it is paramount to their success in being able to go out and compete, especially in the workforce areas. And so having the students know about it and use it here shortens their time span that they will need to have that skill taught to them when they are at a college, whether it's a community college or at a four-year institution. In terms of safety, the recent incident at our college speaks very prominently to the fact that we need to be prepared before an incident, know what to do during an incident, and have mechanisms in place after an incident. And having all of the resources in place, such as speakers and other things that are part of safety, is very, very important to all of us in this community. And finally, the item in terms of the transportation. As you're well aware, the college, which started off 10 years ago, was very small. We've grown to a large proportion, and a lot of what we do is impacted by traffic. And unfortunately, when there were decisions made about even building our new center, it was impacted by how were we going to address the traffic, because everyone looked at the fact that the school system had changed the parameters of which students could go get on the bus, and that meant there were more cars, more traffic out on the highways. So everything that happens here impacts us in Cypher. The final one is you brought up about the bond. Our bond, when we try to get it passed, impacts 2 different counties, not just one. So my final comment is Bedell Sassoon. You look good, we look good.
Thank you, Dr. Levy. Our next speaker is Leslie Martone.
How do you follow a comment like that? President Ryan, Superintendent Henry, and of course, distinguished board members, being a part of the Long Range Planning Committee was such an honor for me. And as president of the Cypher Houston Chamber of Commerce, and how our businesses come and be a part of our organization, they relate to us what their needs in this community are, and their needs are for this school district to be of a premier status. And I think that we will only maintain that status if we vote yes for this bond election. I urge you to do that. I don't think there's anything in here that is not necessary. Everything is something that our students can use. Every student can use it. Every campus will use it. Every campus will be affected, and we're very excited about that. So it's already been said this evening. I just ditto what they said, but I urge you to vote yes tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Martone. Our next speaker is Fred Benson.
Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to visit with you. My name is Fred Benson. I'm a dad of 2 wonderful daughters. I'm a volunteer in the district, and I was on the Long Range Planning Committee that brings this bond proposition to you, and I encourage you to support it. My comments are primarily for the community. If this bond election is called, the next few months are going to be extremely difficult. There are very strong forces that will tell you that it's okay to say no to this. And they're going to tell you that it's okay to say no to this because what you have in front of you is a bunch of bloated bureaucrats, liberal tax and spenders, people that flush money down the toilet. And all of that is wrong. And all of that is a lie. Susan Combs, you don't get much more conservative than Susan Combs, was in our district today to compliment Cypher for the way finances are handled in this district. So people who are telling us about wasteful spending in our district and frills are not from this community and don't understand this leadership team and the teachers and the people who work hard in this district every day. My wife and I moved here for the schools, and I suspect that many of you did as well. I'm extremely proud that my daughters go to school in one of the best educational organizations in the nation. And I think it's important to say yes to this bond election. I think it's important to say yes for safety, for security, for the educational enhancements that we will bring our children. I think it's important to say yes because the day we turn our back on this school system is the day that our community starts to decay. And once that starts, it's extremely difficult to stop. And one last thought. You're going to hear a lot in the next few months about burdens and burdens and burdens. That's the entire tenor of bond elections in the state of Texas right now. And these children are not burdens. These children are gifts from God, created in His image, and they deserve our support. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Benson. Our next speaker is Tom Pickford.
Good evening. It's a pleasure to be here again. My name is Tom Pickford. I'm a longtime resident. My kids grew up and graduated from Cypher schools. The right to vote is an individual right, not a collective right. I ask this body to set forth a bond issue to the individuals of our community so that they can exercise their individual right, take personal responsibility, and exercise their individual right to vote. The needs are great. Time is short. Action is required. 20,000 new students are coming to Cy-Fair, whether you take action and present the bond issue or not. We have to have facilities for those students. Our current facilities are aging and require repair. You know, on a leaky faucet, if you catch it right off the bat and put a new washer in there, then the cost is the cost of a washer. But if you let it fester and don't fix it, the cost is a brand new faucet. We don't want to go down that path. That's the wrong path. The needs are great. Time is short. Do we wait to take the action for the safety of our students? I say no. Time is short. I ask you to take action, present this bond issue to the voters, and I then would ask the voters to take personal responsibility to exercise their individual right to vote, and to vote yes for the children of Cy-Fair by voting for the bond issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pickford. Our next speaker is Sherry McKegg.
Good evening, Dr. Henry, President Ryan, and members of the board. My name is Sherry McKegg, and I am a principal in the district. However, I am not here tonight as a principal. I am here as a private citizen and a committee member. It was my pleasure to serve on the Long Range Planning Committee, Vision 2020.
Hold on just a second, Sherry. Bob. Okay, go ahead and start again. We had no lights.
No lights?
You said?
Do I have to repeat all of that, or can I just start right?
You can, no, hey, you can start. You survived my daughter in fifth grade.
I
You can
did.
do
It's my
whatever you want.
pleasure. No, that was my pleasure, too. It's my pleasure to serve on the Long Range Planning Committee. The committee spent a great deal of time discussing each individual item presented in the bond proposal, and I fully believe that there is absolutely no fluff in this proposal. Each item has a specific purpose related to student needs, and I felt it was my responsibility to talk to you tonight and that I have a unique perspective of the vision. Not only am I a principal in the district, but I'm a committee member, I am a taxpayer, and I'm a former parent. Both of my boys graduated from Cypress Creek High School, so I was able to look at all of these issues through many different lenses. Everything presented represents student safety and security in some way. The facilities recommendations allow for new schools and facilities to accommodate the student growth experienced across the district. Schools that are overcrowded present unsafe environments for students and staff. The transportation recommendations will allow us to transport students to school by bus even if they live within the 2-mile range. Right now, we do have students walking to school on roads with no sidewalks early in the morning when it is still dark. The bond proposal also will allow us for updated video surveillance systems on our buses. And bus video is used very often in order to maintain a safe environment transporting students. The facilities renovations included in the bond proposal ensure that we maintain the integrity of our existing buildings and facilities. You do not want your air conditioning chillers to go out in June in Texas in a building with no opening windows. The security recommendations obviously directly relate to student and staff safety. And lastly, I cannot say strongly enough how much this district needs the technology updates recommended in the bond proposal. Teachers are trying to stay up with the most current best teaching practices, and they can't do that if they don't have the infrastructure or instructional technology. Lastly, it's my belief that you need to present this bond to the voters in the district. First, to continue as leaders in the field of education, and secondly, to have the ability to continue to offer the highest quality education to all Cypress-Fairbanks students. Thank Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. McKeag. Our next speaker is David Wilson.
Dr. Henry, members of the board, I'm David Wilson. I'm the director of the Cypress, Texas Tea Party. I'm also a Republican precinct chair, and I'm pleased with the recommendations made by the committee, and I like the way the input from the community leaders played a vital role in the process. There's parts of the proposed bond issue that I know are absolutely necessary because of the wonderful growth that we have been blessed with in the Cypress area. I'm also convinced there are other parts of the bond issue that may not be seen as important by voters. No one likes hearing about the tragedy that occurred at Sandy Hook Elementary School, and many times government entities overreact in efforts to show that they're doing something about the problem. The voters need to make that decision. Is the expenditure of millions of dollars on additional buses in order to return to previous busing boundaries prudent? The voters need to make that decision. Is the expenditure of millions of dollars on video surveillance and GPS devices necessary? The voters need to make that decision. Now, I'm getting to the real problem of the bond proposal. Cypher ISD justifies the May 10th election date over November general election date due to savings to the district of about $200,000. I don't want to dispute the savings at this time, but I do want to point out that voter turnout is significantly higher during November general elections than for a single bond issue referendums in May. Cypher ISD uses mobile voting units. They're used to go from school to school each day and to get the votes of the PTA, parents, teachers, school staff. Cypher ISD makes sure their segment of the voters know when and where the mobile voting machines are available. The majority of voters and taxpayers are not given that same type of notification and access to the voting booths. Yes, it might be legal, but it's not just fair or right. 90% of those with a vested interest, those who have contracts, jobs with the districts, those who benefit from bonuses or raises, and they know when and where the voting machines are going to be. So I have two recommendations. First, move the bond election in November. Second, split the bond into 5 or more bond referendums and let a larger number of voters decide in a fair and impartial way what is best for Cypher ISD. There's still time to do the right thing.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Our next speaker is Dr. Godfrey Hubert.
Members of the board and Dr. Henry, it's my privilege to stand before you to say thank you for your work and to encourage you to put this before the voters as well. And I think May is the right time. On an aside, a party which I've often supported myself has often prayed for rain and snow in November elections to reduce turnout. So I think it's a little disingenuous. That's on a side. Here's why I think this is good. I think that it is good to say yes to this because it's good for everybody. We've heard about all the ways it's good for the kids. Our kids are competing in a global market today. They're no longer competing just with their neighbors for jobs. They're competing with kids in Burma and India and China and all over Asia and Latin America, and they're improving their school systems. And we're falling behind according to world standards. So I think it's good to say yes for our kids. I think it's good to say yes for our senior adults because their property values that they've invested in for their entire lives would be protected. This bond is a lot cheaper than buying bars for our windows. And I think that is a choice that is truly before us. I think this is good for businesses. We've already heard that. It is also good for churches. I'm a pastor of 30 years in Cypher, and this will make a huge difference. A vote up or down will impact our churches in a huge way. And so I just want to say to you that I'm going to be glad to say yes, because I think this is good. And I think it'll be good for our kids. And I think we need to send a message to the entire state that Cypher is the most desirable place in the entire state in which to live. And I think this will help to do that. And finally, the red light is there, but I'm going to tell my congregation that if there's anybody who says no to this because they can't afford a Big Mac or a #1 Whataburger meal once a month, to give one of those up once a month, give me their bill, I'll pay the difference. And I'll do that for anybody in this room too. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hubert. Our next speaker is Jerry Mutchler. And if I mispronounce your name, I apologize.
I seem to always be following the pastor some way, so. President Ryan, Dr. Henry, school board members, Cypher ISD staff, parents, students, and concerned citizens. I sincerely appreciate this opportunity to speak in support of the bond referendum. Our family has lived in the Cypress-Fairbanks Independent School District for 28 years, and like many of us, and it's been mentioned tonight more than once, we are here because of the quality education our children were going to receive. Our 2 sons graduated from Cy Creek High School, and currently our grandson attends Cy Woods High School and our granddaughter Cy Fair High School. We have been extremely pleased with the education they received. In order to maintain the district's level of excellence as student enrollment increases and keeping pace with technology while maintaining the quality of facilities as we add new ones, and doing whatever is possible to maintain the safety of our girls and boys, I think there is no doubt that additional funding will be required. The only questions are how much and for what. I have been involved, I've seen it in action, and I think considerable time to review the Planning Committee's recommendations are the responsibility of all of us, and I have done that. The recommendations appear reasonable to me. I am sure that you, the 7 men and women that make up the Board of Trustees, will do their very best to determine if this bond referendum should move forward. I do hope you believe it is worthy and allow the registered voters in the Cypress-Fairbanks Independent School District 2 months to study the proposal. On May 10th, we will then be provided the opportunity to cast a vote for or against. Given that choice, I will vote yes. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. That is all the speakers that have signed up tonight, but I would like to ask if anyone came in late and would like their 2 minutes to speak, just raise your hand. If not, I'll continue with the meeting. Okay, thank you. Thank you for all of those that took the time to speak tonight and share your opinion with the board. The board will now review and discuss the following action item. Agenda item 2A, the Cypress-Fairbanks ISD Board of Trustees will consider adopting an order calling a bond election to be held within the district on May 10th, 2014, making provisions for the conduct and the giving of notice of the election and containing other provisions relating thereto. May I have a motion, please?
I move that the Cypress-Fairbanks ISD Board of Trustees approve the administration's recommendation for the adoption of an order calling a bond election to be held within said district on May the 10th, 2014, in the aggregate amount of $1,209,280,000, making provisions for the conduct and the giving of notice of the election and containing other provisions relating thereunto.
Have a motion from Mr. Covey?
Second.
Second from Dr. Ogletree. At this time, I'll entertain questions from board members.
Say something before you start.
But Dr. Henry's going to say something before I start.
Just very quickly, thank you, Mr. President. For anyone watching, I want you to know that the administration took this process very seriously, and we made sure with the recommendation from board members and from people across this community and anyone who wanted to serve on this committee that they had the opportunity to serve. And we had a very diverse committee ethnically and geographically on this committee, and they did come to you with unanimous support for that. But that's just one of the things that I wanted to say. Up until 2007, this district had had a bond program every 3 years because of the tremendous growth. And that growth has continued, as you know, over the past 7 years when we have not had any type of bond program. I was really, my chest kind of stuck out today when Susan Combs, our state comptroller, picked us out of all of the districts in the state to come recognize us as a 5-star winner for the 4th year in a row, one of only 11 districts that have accomplished this in the financial accountability system of Texas, which means we spend at a lower rate and we achieve at higher levels academically than almost every other district in the state. So that was something I'm really proud of, and someone said earlier, if you know Comptroller Combs, you know she's a very conservative person. But I'm not for sure, and Teresa may be able to answer this for me. We recorded her today, and we're going to have that on the website. So I'd like for you to go and view what she had to say about our district from a financial and academic standpoint. Again, the staff certainly identified the needs because we work with it every day, and we proposed them to the committee, and this committee made up their own mind of what to move forward with, because we had many other items that we had listed as needs, and they whittled that down by a third from what we had originally proposed to them. The May and November question, that's a great question. I understand that. And many, many years ago, our state decided that there would only be 2 dates available for bond elections, and that's a May date and a November date. And you used to could hold a bond election just basically whenever you wanted to. So we are following the guidelines set forth by a very conservative state over the last 20 years by picking one of the 2 dates that they offer. And I would also say bond issues are needed more often now because some of the local control that school boards used to have been taken away by this state. So local boards and local administrations operate within the rules and laws designed by the state of Texas, and so that's why this proposal was moved forward in May. And one clarification, at one point we were talking about if the board chose to go forward, if the board chooses to go forward, that we would use, since it's a single item on a ballot, we had talked about using paper ballots, which would have saved the district about $200,000 in cost. But we're not going to be able to do that. It's just very, very difficult to make that work. So we will have the usual voting machines if the board chooses to go forward. But it's still, we're estimating about a $60,000 savings from having the election in May as opposed to November. So I did want to clear that up. Mr. President, I'll turn it over to you, and certainly we have staff and committee members here who will answer whatever questions that this body has.
Thank you, Dr. Henry. Mr. Covey?
Thank you, President Ryan. Stuart, could you remind me, will this $1.2 billion show up as a debt prior to our selling the bonds, or will it doesn't show up if it passes, it doesn't show up immediately as a debt against this district?
Correct.
And if I remember correctly, we have not used up all of our other bonds because we have been very conservative on our using of those bonds.
Correct. If this proposal does pass in the election, then the plan is that that $1.2 billion would be sold over a period of several years. In fact, the plan is that we would sell one tranche each year of about $300,000.
$300 million.
I mean, thank you. $300 million each year for 4 years. And so the only time that the debt would be incurred by the district is when those bonds are sold.
And then also
incrementally throughout that 4-year period of time.
Thanks, Stuart. And we continue to pay off debt every year. Is that correct? About how much do you generally think we pay off in debt?
Well, it depends on the year, but our debt service schedule shows that we currently pay off between $50 million and $100 million each year. And again, depending upon the year as it falls out in our debt service schedule. Prior to the issuance of any bonds that relate to this proposition, we will have paid off about $100 million of our debt by that time.
Okay. Thank you, Stuart. I've got more, but I'll wait. Thank you.
Okay. Dr. Ogletree?
Okay, I'll jump in here. Stuart, if the voters approve this bond, does it in any way affect the homestead exemption that we have for our citizens?
No, sir. Has no effect or impact on the homestead exemption.
Okay. This question, and I've got two more, if that's all right. I guess would go to Teresa. For this May election, if we vote this and approve this tonight, how do we assure that the majority of the citizens in Cypress-Fairbanks have the opportunity to vote?
Well, Dr. Ogletree, in our election order, you will see that we have provided a number of opportunities for our registered voters to take advantage of that opportunity. We have 23 general election day sites that will be on May 10th. And then during the early election time period, we will be utilizing every single elementary campus, all 53 sites at least one day throughout that 10-day time period. They'll be open from a time period, I think, of 2:30 to 7 on those established dates. In addition, during the early voting, we will have the Berry Center and the Instructional Support Center designated as early voting sites as well, and they will be open from 8 to 4 through that entire time period. In addition to that, we will have a Saturday, May 3rd, at the Berry Center and ISC from 8 to 12.
Thank you. I have a security question, and I don't know who should answer that. And I will say at the outset, I think that we don't have enough in this budget for security, and that's a major issue with me. What in this budget, and I don't know who should answer this, what in this budget deters or hinders a student from bringing a firearm on our campuses? And mind you, I ask that because in several of the incidences across this country, we've had students, not outside intruders, to do some terrible things on our campuses. So what in this budget hinders or deters a student from doing that?
Dr. Ogletree, Allen is going to share some information, but we believe that the reinforced plated glass, the security cameras, the access control, all deter a student bringing violent weapons or committing inappropriate acts on campus. But we believe that these initiatives, along with the increased visibility of staff and officers, continuing with safety drills, creating positive school climate initiatives, and uses of things like our data-driven PBIS, all combined, truly deters violent infractions, such as bringing firearms on campus. But I don't know if Chief wants to elaborate on the bullet-resistant glass or the details of the surveillance cameras, or Roy may want to talk a little bit more about that.
One of the things that's included in this proposal, Dr. Ogletree, is actually adding a lot of exterior cameras around the perimeter of the building. And right now, we have some cameras around the perimeter outside, but we don't have cameras in in the parking lots. So one of the things we'll be adding as part of this initiative is adding cameras around the perimeter and peripheral of the site, so that again, that will give us any opportunity that if we see a perpetrator or maybe a student having something that doesn't look right, by video cameraing and looking at the security cameras, we might have the ability to deter that action from that student even walking to the front door.
And Dr. Ogletree, if I may add, none of us up here would be naive enough to tell you that we could absolutely make any campus or any facility absolutely safe from everything. But the way this has been designed is we wanted to make sure that our schools still look like schools, that they were welcoming, that we wanted people to come visit our campuses. So everything that we've included in here are items that are not intrusive on the look of the building. You know, bullet-resistant glass, no one will know that from regular glass. More cameras, people don't even pay any attention to cameras anymore. Card readers that limit access to buildings, people are used to that everywhere they go. But we do still, and it's not included in this bond package, we think that the best way to prevent student violence is for our police officers, our administrators, and our teachers to have positive relationships with our students. Because before a violent act happens on any campus, that student has told someone else about it. So we want to make sure that we have the kind of relationship with those students where they let us know before it will happen.
Mr. Jackson?
Thank you. I didn't have to raise my hand, and you knew I had questions. Last board meeting, I reviewed technology and also transportation. Security has been discussed. So I would turn my attention now to the section that deals with asset protection and enhancement. Roughly 55% of the bond proposal deals with this category. We've been given information that shows that this district enjoys the reputation as being a leader of low-cost building of facilities on a per square footage basis here in the state of Texas. This morning, and I attended the meeting over at Holbrook Elementary, Comptroller Susan Combs gave a nod to the district in this area. My question is overarching. Does this low cost on the front end translate into much higher replacement cost and maintenance for the district when compared to our peer group?
Mr. Jackson, the answer to that is no, it does not. One of the things we pride ourselves on is that we do specify very high-quality products in our buildings. For example, and we try to do this on the basis of make sure that we look at our life cycle cost for the building to keep that lower. You could go into a building and put very cheap materials and do exactly what you're saying. It results in shorter maintenance cycles, which increases our M&O dollars. So we actually do something different. We spend more money on the front end, which helps lower our costs on the back side, and that allows us to be able to keep our buildings and maintain the buildings in the quality they are. We have an excellent maintenance department that does just a wonderful job to keep up with 15.5 million square feet in our school district, and by the fact of the types of materials, we're using a lot of masonry, which is basically virtually maintenance-free. We use brushed aluminum frames whenever possible, so we don't have to come in and paint and do an annual painting, because as in your own house, you probably have to repaint your house every 5 to 7 years. Caulking is another one of those things. We look at the quality type products so we can extend the life of those products so we can minimize the impact to our maintenance and operation budget.
Mr. Covey, you have another question?
You'll come back.
Teresa, I'm going to throw this one at you. One of our speakers the other night was talking about the Berry Center. And I was wondering, do you have figures on what the Berry Center has done like this year as far as, are we in the red still? Are we in the black? What's going on with it?
Well, Mr. Covey, for the 2012-13 fiscal year, I'm pleased to share that we were able to record a profit for the Berry Center of approximately $200,000. And as you can imagine, that's a huge accomplishment because the majority of the time that building is being utilized by the school district, by staff developments, in-district staff development or student events. But we do have the opportunity to generate revenue through some of the outside use. One of the biggest users, as you may know, is Second Baptist Church, and they're able to utilize that facility at times when we tend to not have district events. Sunday, in particular, Monday evening they take over pretty much the entire Berry Center, and then I think Tuesday mornings as well. So we are very pleased to share that they did record a profit for last fiscal year. And I think they're on target to do so this year, but we'll see.
You have any idea like how many events we did in that time?
For last year, it was approximately 4,900 events that were scheduled at the Berry Center. And again, it was divided between in-district or district and student events versus out-of-district events for profit or nonprofit groups. The spring is obviously a heavy time. We have lots of things going on right now. The garden show last weekend, I think the quilt show this weekend, and then we start the huge prom season in the month of April and May.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Covey, if I could add something to that, and I don't know that we can quantify, but having been here 3 years and having been in another school district that did not have such a facility, I can tell you that the cost avoidance of this district far exceeds the profit that it makes. You can just use an example of graduations in my former district. We had to rent a facility for one day, and it was nearly $100,000. Plus, our constituents had to travel and pay $10 to park. So, I mean, if you just take that one event, we have graduations 4 straight days, if you count Winfern. So you can see that there's a lot of cost avoidance there, and you can even go to proms where there's a lot of cost avoidance, and along with the staff development. So one of these days, we're going to figure out a way to show how that operates, and I think that this district will see and the community will see it's a great bargain to have the Berry Center here in our community.
Well, I mean, I agree, and actually, the president before, Ms. Martone, had made the comment a few years ago that the Berry Center is one of the selling points for bringing businesses here. They take them there, and it's as they say, that's when they close the deal with a lot of people that move into our area. And so I'd just like to see the Berry Center kind of be put to bed, and let's just support it and say it's a great choice, and it's doing the job that we ask it to do. And the last thing I kind of wanted to say is, Roy, I just want to tell you thank you very much, even though this is, I didn't even count the pages, but I do know I spent a good amount of days reading through a lot of this. Just looking at what y'all did as far as reviewing facilities and how many times you went over there. And, you know, I think back to some of the bonds that I served on, and I was just telling Kevin a while ago, I said, you know, we pretty much, if I remember correctly back then in 2001, it was the principals that furnished us the information, and then we kind of went through that. But y'all went out and you walked it, not even once or twice, but 3 or 4 times to make sure it was done. So thank you very much for what y'all did as far as putting this together. And I'm through. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Covey. Mr. Hoffman?
Thank you, Mr. President. I guess this question is for Teresa. I don't know, maybe you, Mr. Superintendent. In 2007, that was the last time we had a bond election. When did that happen? Was that in May?
Oh, December.
It was in November. And the one before then, in 2004?
I believe, was that December? Let me look.
December?
I think it was December. That's before the law changed where we only have 2 dates. I believe.
Okay.
I have that. Just a moment. I apologize. I don't want to give you inaccurate information. December 2004.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. I also want to take this opportunity to thank all the community members who served on the bond committee for free and put in all their energy and their institutional knowledge of the district and everything else for our kids. We really appreciate your participation in this process. I think it's important that we do have a a pretty good educational program leading up until May. As was mentioned earlier by Don, all the board can really do is just put this thing on the ballot. Now, it's also the responsibility of the community to make sure everyone is educated and up to speed on exactly what we're doing and why we're doing it. But that's pretty much all I had. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hoffman. Mr. Jackson?
Back to asset protection or enhancement. The largest category here at 25% is architectural. If you go through the information we were supplied, you see that virtually all these expenditures pertain to end of product life or asset renovations. Please comment briefly on the need for these expenditures.
Great question, Mr. Jackson. A lot of that's included in this category is ceilings that, on a lot of our older buildings that need to be replaced. A lot of these materials that we've included as part of the asset protection is basically they've reached their end of their useful life. And they're at that point in time with the high use of our facilities. We've got a lot of students going through these buildings each and every day. And based on all that, we do a great job in maintaining it, but over a period of time, those materials get to the point where they need to be replaced. And in some of the items that are included in this category, like ceilings, doors, the hardware on our buildings for the doors, they go through a lot, doors open and closing all the time during the day. Locker replacements, our student lockers, as well as carpeting, flooring materials, paving materials, and things that we include in the building that have a long useful life, but we're at the point in a lot of these buildings where they're at that point we need to replace them.
The next category is mechanical, and that's roughly 20% of this section. That's relatively self-explanatory, and the material we were given addresses that, and certainly at board meetings, we have reviewed those items as those replacements have been made. Behind that, the third category by percentage at 16% is athletics and activities. My youngest daughter ran track here in the district, and at the middle school level, the track was nothing more than a glorified sand path that came complete with fire ant mounds as well as potholes. The meets themselves took place at the high school tracks, and the high school tracks were badly pitted. Briefly comment on what this bond proposal does in this area, and also why should we do it? Do other districts have it? I know when I grew up, the middle school I attended, we had roughly the same sand track. We didn't have fire ants, but we had ant mounds everywhere.
Let me, if you don't mind, let me touch that one first about the tracks. I'm not going to try to go into any other. I'll leave that up to Roy. But the middle school tracks have three purposes. Number one are for our co-curricular activities, for our PE classes, and for activities that go on during the day. Just like you said, there are pretty days outside, but we can't get on that track because it's covered in mud and it's not usable for our PE classes. And as you know, there's a big push in this state, along with all across the country, to get kids active so we can curb the obesity problem. So it's co-curricular, and then it's extracurricular. We have middle school tracks on all 17, about to be 18 middle schools, and there's no appropriate place for those children to train, and we have more middle school kids that participate in athletics than we do high school children. So that will help us with extracurricular. And then finally, as a community enhancement, what we would like to do, as you said, most of the track meets occur at high school tracks. They're a much more expensive track than what we're talking about putting at middle schools. So we will be able to let our community, we will be able to open up the middle school tracks for our community so we don't have to open up our high school tracks that would interfere with where they can be unsupervised at the middle school and they can't be at the high school because of the cost of the track meets and the equipment that is out there. So kind of three reasons: co-curricular, extracurricular, and then a community enhancement.
And I would like to add, when you go around to a lot of the school districts in the area, they do put a 4-lane middle school track at their campuses. In fact, when I came on board in Cy-Fair, I was actually quite surprised that we did not have running tracks, and then you had kind of the trail that you just described, that's the sand and pits in there. And I'm glad that the committee agreed that we need to consider doing this, because as Dr. Henry said, the community enhancement, but more importantly for our students, and the physical education program at the middle school level to get them ready for their high school curriculum, I think is an important addition for this program. Also included in this athletic number is we have a lot of, with 10 high schools and 17 middle schools, we have a lot of athletic facilities at these campuses. We have a lot of kids running through these programs, both on physical education as well as athletics. The locker rooms need to be repaired, replaced, upgraded to be able to support that high traffic volume of students utilizing that. We also have bleacher replacements. One of the things we always do in our district is inspect our bleachers every 2 years. We hire a structural engineer to come in and inspect our bleachers and make sure they're safe and secure. If there are any items that need to be corrected, we issue work orders immediately and get our maintenance department to make those corrections if any are needed. Some of these bleachers are old and need to basically be replaced at their point, again, the end of its useful life. And a lot of these recommendations are really based on asset protection. Our infrastructure is aging, and as a result of that, we're at that point in time where we're going to have to start reinvesting in our facilities to replace and or upgrade so that we can make these buildings last another 20, 25 years as we continue moving forward serving our community.
The next category by size at 9%, so we're getting into, although these numbers are still large, given the grand scope, the percentage is getting much smaller, is what's been characterized as the building envelope. And I was surprised to find that the vast majority of the building envelope expenditures related to roofing. Is this because we put low-cost roofing on our schools, or did Ike just damage all the roofs and we're just now getting around to repair them?
Another great question. The roofs that are included in this bond program are, again, basically at the end of their useful life. We're going in and going to replace it. The older systems that were specified before I came on board used to be a coal tar pitch roof, and in some cases single ply membranes. Over the years, when I first came on board, we did a complete evaluation of our roofs and came up and developed a standard that's fairly unique in the industry. And we developed a warranty program that we do specify a minimum 20-year warranty, but it's a full system warranty. A lot of warranties that are out there in the market are exclusive of flashings and the decking and so forth, and based on the product we specify, and it's a higher quality product, as I mentioned before, is one of the things we do, and we still get lower construction costs. But that higher quality product enables us to keep that building weather tight, and we don't have water coming into our buildings. And I think the best testimonial I can say is when we went through Hurricane Ike, and we did see a lot of damage in the Cypress area, and I can tell you we did not have any roofs sitting on parking lots like some other school districts did down farther south, because we put the quality into the design of the building. We utilized 22 gauge deck instead of 26 gauge deck. Most structural engineers will tell you 26 gauge is fine. 22 gauge deck stays to the structure, and we weld every flute to make sure that we don't have any uplift of the roof. And Hurricane Ike proved our point. We inspected every single roof after that storm. The only damage we incurred was basically from flying debris from areas around our school, flying and hitting the top ply of the roof, and we had to come in and do some miscellaneous repairs to fix that top ply. In one case, on one building, I think we had some vents that were not properly secured, and they flew off, and we had to, since then fix that. But the roof systems themselves passed that test, and we had some pretty strong winds out here in Cypress, and I think our roofs have proven that what we do and what we specify is in the best interest of our taxpayers and our students. And if we have a bunch of water coming into our buildings, students are going to have a difficult time trying to learn in a good, conducive environment. And then you also run into indoor air quality problems and other things that affect the health of our students and our staff if we don't have a good roofing system. So one of the things we do, we invest very strongly in our roofing system because we feel that's a very important part of the overall building envelope structure.
Thank you. We've already briefly touched on the concept of vestibules. I would share with the board, Bob was at a meeting I attended. We had an opportunity to visit with other board members throughout the Gulf Coast area, and I was surprised to find out that some of the security concepts that we're adding, such as the vestibule, was standard at these other districts for years. In one specific case, standard well over 10 years ago. I would also share with the board that I remain critical of the technology budget that we have. I trust management when you say that you have provided for technology. However, technology is a wonderful helpmate, but when we don't give her enough resources, she can become rather cruel, and this district and our teachers have seen the impact of an underfunded technology system. But happily, I'm not management, so I don't have to make that decision. That concludes my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson. Mr. Covey.
A quick one here, and Dr. Henry, maybe you need to answer this, but can you just once again explain what bonds can be used for and what they cannot be used for?
Well, I could do that, but Stuart would give a much more concise answer. So is that okay if I let him? That's his area of expertise.
Well, bonds can be sold only for the purpose in which they are voted on. And so what the proposition says is the building and renovation and equipping of schools and the purchase of buses and purchase of technology. And so the bonds as they are sold can only be used for those purposes. They cannot be used for any maintenance or operation items such as salaries, benefits, supplies, fuel, those types of things. So it's separate and apart from your operating budget. It's accounted for in the construction and the renovation and all of the project costs are accounted for in a separate legal entity budget in the capital projects budget, and then the debt associated with the selling of those bonds is accounted for in a separate legal entity in the debt service fund. And the debt service fund can only be used for the payment of the principal and interest on the debt as a result of the selling of the bonds.
Just a follow-up to that, I'm sorry, but I know that in one of, or maybe two of our bonds, we have had cost savings that have allowed us to build more buildings, and that is allowed. Is that correct?
That's correct. As long as you complete all of the items that were proposed in the bond order, in the bond election. In fact, a case in point is in the 2004 election. All of the projects that were provided for in that election have been completed, and we have money left over that is unissued bonds or unsold, same thing. That in those cases where all of the projects have been completed and you have money available that were authorized, then you can use that money for other types of capital projects, such as the construction and renovation of schools.
Mr. Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to ask, Dr. Ogletree asked this question previously, but I want to ask it again. Management, you are proposing that the bond election be held in May. Would you go over again why you believe that this is an appropriate time to hold the election?
Sure, I'll start that, and then if anybody wants to join in if I forget anything. You know, I'll go back to what I said at first. The state of Texas and our lawmakers have designated 2 days that we're allowed to call an election, and that's in May and in November. We felt like, and we really, in all honesty, Mr. Jackson, are probably 2 or 3 years behind for a bond program. But as you know, the economy was in a downturn, and we just did not think it would be appropriate 2 or 3 years ago to bring anything to this body and to take out to the citizens. But the number one reason we think May is most appropriate is that we have some pressing needs. Technology. You talk to any teacher, any principal in this district, and they will tell you, they call it the spinning wheel of death when they go to put grades in the system and they can't get on the system. Similar maybe to the healthcare program that when it started out, you know, it's that same philosophy. You just can't get on the system because we don't have enough technology capacity. So this would help us put some of that in place for the 14-15 year as opposed to it being almost the 15-16 school year. So May is appropriate for that. Transportation, we realize that we need to, because of the growth in this district and the number of intersections, the number of traffic, and of course many of you have heard my theory is that 1 out of every 3 people are texting while they're driving. We need to get children on school buses and not walking to school 1.5 miles or 2, and we want to start that this next fall. So that's another reason. Land is not getting any cheaper. We want to start purchasing property as soon as we can because our area, you've heard our demographer say, that we are in the epicenter of growth in Cypher ISD for not just the area, but in the state, that Grand Parkway area. We know that we need to get some school sites purchased. And then finally, you know, all of these tie to safety, but safety and security, making our buildings as safe and secure, not just for our students, but our students and our staff, and to make sure that we're providing the safest environment for anyone who goes to our schools, works at our schools, or visits our schools. So we think this gives us a 6-month to year head start is the primary reason, May.
Really, one question I had, and probably also a comment. Arturo, if I can lean on you for a second. When we come and sit before the public here, we're board members. Once I walk out that door, and we're not in a called meeting, I'm not a board member. They're not board members. I am a parent. I'm a taxpayer. I'm a homeowner. And I'm a business owner. I can tell you that I am personally, as Don Ryan, going to vote yes in May for this bond. And I'm personally going to vote yes for a lot of reasons. One, Ms. Stringfellow has brought up 5 times maybe on transportation. The elementary that my neighborhood feeds into doesn't have transportation, also doesn't have sidewalks, which I think is dangerous, but that's just me. And so I have several reasons why I'm going to support it. How can I publicly support it when I want to tell my neighbors in Wortham, where I live, in Barwood and Tower Works, all that area, and say, hey, these items here in this bond package are going to benefit our community, because that's where I'm active, is in my community. How can I do that, and would it be legal for me to do that?
Yeah, I think the way you began, there's a distinction between acting as a public official at a meeting and in your private capacity. What the election code prohibits is it prohibits using public funds for political advertising, which is defined to be advocating for the passage or defeat of a measure in this instance. So in your private capacity, you and employees are free to give your voice as you feel as citizens regarding what you think voters should be doing in this election. In your capacity as either officials or employees, there you cannot use resources to advocate the passage or defeat. Resources can be used to explain factual aspects about the election. You can talk about what the measure is, what it will do, and so on, but in your capacity as public officials or employees, you cannot advocate passage or measure. But in a private capacity, you're free to do so.
Okay, thank you. I just think that there needs to be somehow to let everyone know that has ever sat in a car rider line that they need to learn about this bond referendum. It's the worst thing a parent has to do for their entire life. Just want to point that out. Any additional questions from board members? I have a motion from Mr. Covey, a second from Dr. Ogletree. All those in favor, please signify, raising your hand. It's unanimous. We don't have a need for closed session tonight, and so that will conclude our meeting. And let me tell everyone that that came out and took the time to hear this tonight and also took the time to speak. We appreciate your input and we appreciate your support. Thank you very much and have a nice evening.